Just a friendly reminder that the opinions expressed on this show are not worth a Canadian penny, so disregard anything you hear that might get anyone in trouble. And despite some of the great ideas you may hear, don't try them at home. Go to a friend's house instead.
It's time to get a gun. That's what I've been thinking. Well, I could afford one. And if I did just a little less drinking, time to put something between me and the sun. When the talking is over, it's time to get a gun.
Hello and welcome to Slamfire Radio. This is episode 306 for May 30th, 2019. I am your only host today, Adriel. Kelly and Trevor and McFly are not available today. They're out like maple seeding and doing range stuff and flying and all that kind of fun stuff. So just me today. What we did in guns this week is brought to you by the Calgary Shooting Centre, Canada's premier firearms retailer. Right now you can buy any SIG AR-15 for between $1,800 and $2,100 and receive a Surefire M300 weapon light, same as what the RCMP is running, for $100. And that is normally $400. So check that out at the Calgary Shooting Centre. Let me just move around my screens here so I can see what I'm doing. There, I got the notes. All right. In terms of what I was up to on Saturday, I was at the Chaz Open House. This was our kind of open house. Anyone can show up, check things out, learn about the range if they want to join the range, and then see the different leagues. So we had the service rifle guys running a service rifle booth. We had Cowboy Action running a stage. We had 3 Gun running 2 stages. We had a 25 meter shoot. We had kids shoot free 22s. The kids can shoot the 22s. And it was extremely busy. The weather was fantastic. And had a lot of people out there. A lot of listeners showed up too. A couple of Slamfire listeners came up and said hi, which is really cool. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to really chat too long, just because we had such a backlog of people who wanted to shoot a 3 Gun stage. So that my priority at open house was running as many people as possible through a 3 Gun stage, and that's really what we designed the stage for, and tried to do that day. And then after sitting out in the sun and at the range for 12 hours, I was like, you know what I should do? I should go to that pistol match I was talking about on Thursday. So I went and hit that up. That was the Bonneville Sport Shooters, BSSA. They were running a pistol match on Saturday. Again, met a couple of listeners there. There was Tobin I met, Mark P, who's been on the show before, and a couple of others were there as well. It's kind of funny. Mark with a K, who, we mess around a little bit with spelling of names and that kind of thing. He was putting my name into the practice score tablet. He's like, your last name, how do you spell that again? And they got me to spell it out. I was like, that was weird. And then whatever, later on, towards the end of the day, I took a look at practice score, and my name was my last name was spelled 100% correct, but my first name was Andriel. I see what you did, Mark. I see what you did. Very good. Let's see. Okay, there was a couple of things that I wanted to do well at this match. And I remember them because I wrote them down. One of them was memorizing my stage plans. I wanted to pay particular attention to that, and this was a great match for that. They put together a really interesting stage design. So a lot of the stages were exactly out of they were just standard IPSC stages, not classifiers, but they were really interesting, really complicated. Some of them were absolutely our first stage of the day was a memory stage, barrels and targets that you could see from different positions. So it was a good thing that I wanted to put a little bit more time into that, and it was to a point. So I did my stage walkthroughs, memorized my stage design, my stage shoot throughs. But one thing that I found was that I memorized them, and when I did my shoot through afterwards, I did it too slowly. So when I actually shot the stage, I found myself thinking I was done too quickly. So I had shot and I was like, am I done? I was looking around for other targets that I had forgotten about because I finished too quickly, but it was because I had practiced too slowly. So one of the things that I might want to try next time is practicing at speed or just visualizing myself moving quickly, because just walking it and air gunning it, when it came time to actually perform, I was actually thinking I was too fast, thinking I was leaving targets behind, and I wasn't really leaving any behind. So that was really interesting, and it was a fun match. I mean, like one of the things I realized just shooting that match, I would probably shoot like a lot more IPSC if it was convenient, and if there was more around me. I was just looking at the IPSC website here. The next matches that I could possibly go to. One of them's 3.75 hours drive. One's 4.2 hours drive. One's a 5.5 hour drive. One's a 3 hour drive. That's Bonnyville. I might do that one. Another one was 2.2. That's at the Rocky Rod and Gun Club. That's only 2 hours to go, but I have a wedding to attend. So like it makes it difficult for me to imagine shooting just like IPSC when the matches seem to be all over Alberta. They don't seem to be centralized around Edmonton, and a lot of them are in the south. I think Tabor does a lot, and there's not really any club around me that seems to do consistent pistol practices either, like a pistol league or a men's league or something like that. Because if there was, I'd probably shoot it. I'd probably do more of that stuff. So I don't know, food for thought. I mean, whereas like 3-gun, I've got monthly club here. We've got a monthly club in Cold Lake. We've got the clubs down in Calgary. There's 2 of them down there doing 3-gun, and again, all over the place. So I'll probably keep shooting 3-gun because I like shooting 3-gun, and because it's much more convenient for me. Well, I think what that means is that we need an IPSC club in Edmonton that shoots more regularly. I know that Phoenix puts on the odd match, but we need something that's a little bit more regular. And outdoors would be nice too, because the smoke blows away and all that kind of stuff. So that was my weekend. Last week I thought I was going to Sherwood Park to talk about Maple Seed. That's actually tonight. I checked the calendar just before I left last time, and I found out that I had my weeks mixed up. But so I'm going to head out there after the show here and talk to him a little bit about Maple Seed. Upcoming events. So Ryan McLean has mentioned to us that our registration for the Meaford Long Range Steel Challenge is now open. If you're interested in helping out at this event, please contact Ryan McLean through the MLRSC Facebook group or visit Practice Score. There's some information on there to get in touch with them. The other event that we want to talk about here was the 9th annual Podcasters Charity Shoot in Drumheller. Tickets are still available for that. They're on Eventbrite. Just search Podcasters Charity Shoot. There's going to be the Podcasters Charity Shoot. Gavin from Ragnarok Tactical is also going to do a Stop the Bleed course that day. So lots to do. And the nice thing is that if you're not from the area, if you're from BC or Saskatchewan and you drive in for this thing, Drumheller is actually a pretty cool place. There's a lot to do around there. So if you want to bring the family around, this is a charity shoot you actually could bring the family to, because there's the Royal Tyrrell Dinosaur Museum, and then there's also the Badlands around there. It's a bunch of really cool stuff. There's like a coal mine and a bunch of really cool things around there that you can check out. Maple Seed is heading out east, and there's still spots available for that. So there's Restigouche, May 31st. That's tomorrow. That's probably where Trevor's at right now, actually, is helping out with that. And Kelly, actually. They're probably both there. That's where they are. There'll be Brettlebane PEI, Brettlebane. I think that's correct. That'll be June 2nd. And then Fredericton will be June 6th. You can head over to mapleseedrifleman.com to find out more about those. And the news, I'll probably wait until we've got some of the other guys on to talk more about this. But the first one was that C-71 was voted in. So that legislation there's one more step that it needs to do. It needs a royal assent, but it's ready to go now. So we'll probably talk more about that next week once we've got a little bit more information on some of the repercussions of that. The next piece of news I have here: Salesforce bans customers from selling semi-autos and 10-round mags. So if you're a regular person and you don't do a lot of like B2B or work a lot with sales software, you probably don't know Salesforce. Salesforce is a really big sales CRM. It's software that companies use for managing customers and that kind of thing. And they're banning semi-autos and more than 10 round mags and that kind of thing. So customers who are on that platform are now going to have to start looking for something else out there. So it's kind of a painful thing, but looks like that's happening. The next one is that the feds. Now this is actually a global news article that I was reading, and the title of the article is "Feds Look to Clamp Down on Guns," quote, "designed to hunt people," end quote. So that piece is new. The quotes from Bill Blair are still the same. He's still talking about they'll go to any means necessary, up to and including a ban on handguns. But I don't think he doesn't think that will have all of the necessary effect. This new thing that they're mentioning is that Blair's office was saying that assault-style rifles are military weapons designed to hunt people, not animals, in a way that maximizes the body count at minimum effort. And that's a bit of a new way to think about that, and a new quote out of them, if you will. And it's a little bit concerning because, again, assault weapon is not defined, and there's we're always worried about how they would actually like lay that out, because they haven't really because they're not gunnies. They haven't really done a really decent job at defining out what this all means. So a little bit worrisome there. For the new gun stuff, what I'm going to do is share that on screen with you guys. Let's go over there. Now, one of the things I wanted to share with you guys on the new gun stuff, Double Tap has Cajun Gunworks parts in stock. Now, Cajun Gunworks is a really well-known parts manufacturer for the CZ Shadow line of pistols, and they've got some really cool springs and firing pins and triggers and whatnot. So it's really encouraging to see Double Tap bringing these in, because now we're going to see those, start to see them in Canada. You can see that they're popular because there's only one thing left in stock, and that's the ultralight firing pin kit. But this is good. This means that if Double Tap starts bringing in Cajun Gunworks stuff more often, that'll be incredible. Cajun doesn't export directly to Canada, so you can't buy directly from them. So it's going to be great for these for us to have a local Canadian retailer that's bringing these things in. That's fantastic. And the next one is this Canuck Victor. This is a competition-ready shotgun. It's a Turkish shotgun. And pretty interesting in that it comes with a lot of the competition-ready features that you'd want in a 3-gun shotgun, for example. So it's got extended controls. The port job is done on it. It's got an extended tube on it. So it's got a lot of the stuff that you would want on a competition shotgun already, and it's all ready to go. So we should start seeing that showing up across the country as well. And the last one, more of a general comment. AR uppers and lowers are very hard to find. If you remember last week, we talked. We brought up a video that Tracy had put out saying, like, hey, go buy an AR because they might go pro here. We've got it on good authority that they will. So AR uppers and lowers are really hard to find right now. They've had a couple of runs on them where they show up. True North Arms, for example, they brought in 300 matched uppers and lowers, and they sold them out like that. So lots of ARs being moved. There still are a bunch of full rifles being sold. So like Cabela's still has the M&P Sports, and there's a couple of other retailers that still have those. It's just the uppers and lowers that are in really high demand and really difficult to find right now. A lot of people are buying those ARs to get grandfathered in. So in case the government uses an order in council to ban the AR-15s and prohibit them, those people want that classification on their license. So that's what they're doing there is purchasing a lower so that they qualify. They're in before the lock, and they can buy ARs after the fact, right? We have a survey still available on our Facebook and on our website right now. We're going to close this thing right away. So if you have feedback on the podcast, please let us know. And thank you again to all those who have submitted their feedback. One of the things that we keep trying to do with this podcast is continue to improve it and make it better. So, and the only way that we can really do that is by you guys telling us how you want it improved, and constructively telling us what we need to do to make it better. So again, we really appreciate the feedback we've got. We've already got over 100 responses, so we've got lots of different viewpoints in there, and that's good. That means that we'll be able to make moves that are going to get more of our listeners, more of what they want out of the show. All right, why don't we move on to the main topic? And welcome to the show, Rob from British Muzzleloaders. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Hey, how are you?
Excellent. I mean, it's a little bit smoky here in Alberta. We've got some fire action going on, but
'tis the season.
'Tis the season. Yeah, it's either frozen or on fire, it seems these days.
And campfire season lasts about that long.
Yeah. But maybe just to start off with, so British Muzzleloaders, you've got a YouTube channel. Tell us what it's all about. What do you focus on, and what are you into?
Well, British Muzzleloaders is what I like to term, and the term's been used in other areas as well, but an historical shooting channel. So what that means, well, to me, they're obviously open to all kinds of interpretation, but it's the use of historical firearms in an historical context. And in my case, it's a military context. So all the rifles that I feature on the channel are old, predominantly 19th century, but not exclusively, military rifles. And the channel sort of strives to showcase these sort of semi-individually within their own eras of history, and all the supporting sort of aspects to them, which means not only the firing of them, but the loading of them and the reloading of them, as the case may be, but also sort of the way the military used them, which sort of goes down a bit of a rabbit hole sometimes as far as the drill that's associated, because armies, especially in the 19th century, were predominantly driven by the maneuver of men on the battlefield and the delivery of that firepower on the same. So you carry a rifle a certain way, you use it a certain way, you get taught how to shoot it a certain way, and so all these things come into play. And I try and kind of, as they say, pick a specific rifle and sort of develop a package of videos around that, dealing with various aspects of it. And then, moving off and branching off in comparisons with other rifles and whatnot. So that, in a nutshell, to me, is what historical shooting is all about. It's always based on a few different specific aspects, which are one of course is an original or a good quality reproduction, a firearm, and ammunition, which is also important. But it also includes the use of documentation from there and that kind of thing, which is as accurate as you can get it, and equipment. Now, by equipment, I mean, in the military context, soldiers need to carry their ammunition and all their equipment when they go into the field, and that has an effect on the way you shoot, the way you manipulate the firearm and whatnot. So that comes into play as well. And then, sort of to top it off and make perhaps a more interesting presentation, I have injected items of clothing, which again don't necessarily have much to do with the shooting, but it's more for the sort of the fluff on the outside to make it look good. But those are the sort of aspects that I consider to be part of historical shooting, and that's what the channel's all about.
Yeah, one of the videos I was just watching just recently here was you were shooting out to 400 yards with a Martini Henry, and there was a couple of interesting things about that video. One was, I think a lot of people have banged steel at 400 with modern firearms out in the bush or in the mountains or something like that. But to see it done in period clothing with all the stuff was really interesting, because one of the things you did was you had your standard kit on, and you took some of the kit off and used some of the kit in your shooting positions to make for a more stable shooting position. So that part was really interesting, because you have to probably both consult some field manuals as well as get a little bit creative with how you use some of that stuff to get like a good shooting position, a good solid position. One of the things I noticed, you had this crazy little rest that was like modular. It's got like 4 legs on it, and it's got like a rounded top. Tell me about that. Where's that thing from?
Right. It's from right here. To sort of draw back to the issue of equipment, typically, your personal equipment carried, especially it does still to this day to a point, but especially back then, the 19th century and the sort of first half of the 20th century, your personal equipment contained not only ammunition, but water and food. and as a method to carry some of the like meat ration and that kind of stuff, but also to cook it, especially at an individual level, or maybe between you and your family, your partner, so to speak. You needed a mess tin, which for the 19th century was predominantly of one general pattern, and that pattern looked like a sort of a semicircle that with a flat back and a rounded front, and then sort of it's like a mini pot set that you'd get at the camping store today. Only instead of being round like a pot set, it's semicircular. So that was a feature of sets of equipment from sort of just at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, and that ending in 1815, all the way through to the I think in the 1937 pattern equipment. The square rectangular mess tin came into service. So it lasted for an exceptionally long time. And it's on the various sets of equipment, this mess tin was carried typically in a cover, although not always, but strapped somehow, incorporated into it. That along with a greatcoat, which is a big, heavy sort of calf-length woolen coat for bad weather and whatnot. So these two items specifically, they're omnipresent as far as military equipment in the 19th century goes. And what I thought that in order to put things in a sort of historical or semi-historical context was that when I first developed it, I didn't have a greatcoat, which I do now. And I didn't have a mess tin. But I thought, how can I take those two things and make them applicable to shooting? Because obviously shooting is the focus of the channel. And in my brainstorming, I thought, well, a greatcoat sometimes gets substituted for a blanket a mat for. And by making a mat that folds up into a certain dimension and rolled, given a certain size, then that sort of takes that position of the greatcoat. Well, the mess tin, well, what can I do with that? How can I incorporate that somehow? And I thought if you turn it on its end with the flat on the bottom and have this semicircular, part facing up, the sides being parallel, that might work for a shooting rest because, typically when rests are mentioned in that era, it's always in support of the back of the hand or the wrist as opposed to just resting the rifle on it. That notwithstanding, I thought that perhaps if we could raise it a little bit off the ground, then that would make for a really nice profile kind of item to use in longer range, or when you're working up, and got a new rifle and you've got to get a load developed for it, that having that rest is very beneficial. But then when the equipment is being used and sort of seen on camera, then it sort of fills that role, that position on your equipment of the mess tin. And so I took that shape and sort of just went with it and added, as you say, 4 legs to it. And I don't know, I can't remember in that video if I used the adjustability of it or not, but the top, it's actually in, I guess, 6 pieces, the 4 legs, the base, and then the top is adjustable for height as well. So you can get up to, I think is it about 11 inches high with the legs. If you're shooting uphill or downhill or something like that you happen to being predominantly a shoot in the bush. So, a nice flat firing point is not necessarily always going to be there. But yeah, so it came out of that desire to sort of kind of hide in an historical way, an implement that I would use very regularly, and not just pull out, some plastic thing you bought at the store and plop that down. So anyway, it's just the way my mind works sometimes. And sort of a day and a half later of being in a shop and cutting and sewing and, drilling and gluing, and there it was.
Yeah, an old-timey bipod, adjustable bipod too, not just a regular one, adjustable. Yeah. But I did notice, you put your hand under the rifle and you put that rest then was on your hand. So, you stacked them in there, which was kind of so now I know why.
Yeah, that's a sort of predominantly like even into the Second World War, the 1940s and whatnot, when the rest is mentioned, and specifically in the practices that the military used in the Great War and in World War II, that having the rifle rested is an integral part of some of the practices. And there's a specific mention that it's the hand or the arm that's rested, not the rifle. And so that is a common theme throughout military, marksmanship of the era. And so it's just something that I typically try and incorporate as opposed to, drawing back and just letting it sit on top of the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was super interesting to watch. One of the other things that it was on the same video was something that kind of blew me away was blow tubing.
Oh yes, yeah. If I had a nickel for all the comments that were posted on those videos about what I'm doing or what they thought I was doing, or they thought they were funny making a joke about it, I'd be a rich man.
Well, so just for our listeners, and I'll give the really bad explanation that you can maybe follow up after me here. Was the idea that blowing down the barrel to get some condensation on it so that the deposits would be a little bit softer. Is that about the idea?
That's exactly the idea.
Yeah, except absolutely. You take that idea and like go pro on it, because you've got a piece of brass and another angled 303 piece of brass that uses as kind of like a mouthpiece. So you can get like a perfect seal and get just your breath right down the chamber and the bore of the rifle.
Right. I mean, they existed historically. I've got pictures from the 1870s and 80s and 90s. It's predominantly it's a black powder thing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, black powder sort of was phased out in the 1890s as a military propellant, but it's completely historical. It doesn't have a context in sort of like actual battle, obviously. But what it does have a context in is marksmanship and competition. And in the beginning in around the 1860s and all the way through, which is interesting, people aren't necessarily aware, it was shooting in the UK specifically, and by extension the rest of the empire, was a very popular and emphasized sort of sport. And the military was hand in hand with that. The National Rifle Association in the UK. Now, don't quote me on this, but I believe it predates the organization, the same name in the United States. But famously, the first shot at the competitions was fired by Queen Victoria from a rifle that was sort of put together on a rest with big weights hanging below it, and she pulled a little silken cord and fired the shot. And the target is hanging in Britain. Now I'm just having to remember the name. I'm sure there's somebody that'll be able to tell me or remind me where it's hung, but it's a period target, which is made of iron, 6 foot high by 2 foot wide, with a big black bullseye, and you can see just off center where the round hit. So this culture of marksmanship is especially in that era, it was huge, and it was integral to the military. So the blow tubing aspect really sort of finds its place there, because you're not necessarily dealing with straight up military shooting, but you are in a competitive environment trying to get a best score. And in order to do that, especially with black powder, that you need to keep the fouling soft, because if it gets hard, especially in hot weather and that kind of thing, that's a hard deposit in the barrel, and then that will lead to the bullet not perhaps seating perfectly or as perfectly as it could be in the bore, and resulting in some inaccuracy. So there's a number of things that black powder is sort of always fired with, and that is some sort of, it's often called lubricant, but it's more fouling management. So as lubricant, as opposed to lubricating surface on surface, it's incorporated into the cartridge, or in the older cases into the muzzle loading cartridge, to keep the fouling soft, and that's what it's there predominantly to do. And after 1859, it is beeswax, pure beeswax, and that's used right through from the Enfield muzzle loading cartridges all the way through the Snyder and the Martini, and they all have some way of incorporating beeswax into the bore when you shoot to help keep the fouling soft. So that blow tubing is, I know it's a bit of a long-winded sort of introduction to it, I guess, but it's something that I use when I'm trying to shoot my best, as it were.
Yeah,
and having that short, stubby little piece on it instead of a tube, I thought anyway that there's less of a chance of my breath condensing in the tube rather than in the bore. So by getting closer to the breech, I can deliver as much moisture to the barrel as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you see these little tips and tricks that modern shooters do. I mean, they'll have a card on their barrel so that their scope doesn't pick up any mirage, and they'll have a bunch of other little weird things that they do to get their best shots off in a competitive environment. That's kind of neat to see the old timey tips and tricks to shooting a black powder rifle as accurately as possible, and that blow tubing was one of them. And I mean, I would consider shooting a Martini Henry out to 400 yards to be pretty challenging, right? Iron sights, in terms of the cartridge, in terms of the velocity? Like, what kind of velocity are you getting out of a cartridge like that?
The ammunition that I've sort of developed, I guess you could say, obviously it's based completely on historical components and whatnot, but there's small deviations just because it is the modern day. And for instance, the case of a Martini Henry initially was made out of brass foil that was crimped and shaped. So
Japan, right? That's a Japan case.
Well, the Japanning is just a term for basically like painting it black and giving it some sort of proofness against weather or rust or anything like that. So you see a Japanning applied to fabric, a Japanning applied to metal. So the base of the Martini cartridge, as well as the Snyder for that matter, was made of iron. So that part was japanned, and it's black. It's like shiny black. But the rest was brass foil. And just the way that you would roll anything, a cigarette or anything like that, is that in this process, the foil was coiled around a mandrel, and then the components introduced, the powder and whatnot, and the bullet, and then it was all crimped and put together. So when you look at an historical example, of which you can do easily by looking on the internet, it looks like it's really wrinkly and like, what is that? It looks like it's been damaged almost, but in fact it hasn't. So that's impossible. Well, not impossible, but it's impossible for any kind of normal person with normal access to components to reproduce. There's been some attempts to do that, but it was made on machinery. It wasn't made by hand and this kind of stuff in factories in the UK. So there's always going to be differences. And then part of getting those sort of differences up is having to work up your own loads and find out where your rifle's shooting, because your velocities necessarily aren't quite the same. So the service velocity of a Martini Henry is 1,300 feet per second, thereabouts. And mine shoot at 12, I'm just trying to remember, 1240, I think it was. Just over 1,200 anyway, which isn't actually that different. So it's got the same kind of report. Martini is a hefty, it's got a bit of a kick to it. It's not, uncomfortable at all. But, when I get 1,200 plus feet per second, that's pretty close to historical. And it uses the same weight of powder. But, powder now is not quite what it was. And gunpowder in the 19th century had evolved by the end of that century to be it was at its acme, really. And most, I won't say all, but most powders today they become close, but not to the standard of the era. There are some brands that come very close, and people would swear on the Swiss is an example of a very high quality black powder. But I don't have necessarily access to that, and I use GoEx because it's what I have access to. So I use 85 grains of that in the Martini cartridge, which is the historical weight that it was used. So my velocity is a bit less. That to me indicates that, well, maybe the powder is not quite as energetic in its componentry and in the results that you get. So, the 1,200 I'm certainly happy with that. That's what I get, and I try to match the construction of the cartridges in the various rifles and with the service load of the era. I would say the one place I've deviated most significantly is in the Enfield muzzleloading world. And that is driven solely by accuracy. And that was my first journey into this whole thing, was the Enfield rifle musket of 1853 pattern. So it's a sort of, I would say, perhaps closest to my heart.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do what you can with the components you have. And doing a foil brass case would be a pain in the butt, especially when it came to reload and you put that thing through your press.
Well, yeah, and I don't have a coil or a foil Martini cartridge. I have a foil Snyder cartridge, and they're packed. It's not just empty like perhaps a modern round where you can shake it and hear the powder rattling around. The components are packed is the wrong word, but there's no airspace in there. So when you squeeze the side of it, if you bear down on it, you'll deform it like really hard. But, just sort of drop it on the floor or something like that, it's not going to be unusable. And the chambers of the rifles of the era and the dimensions of those cartridges were taken into consideration when they were developing the measurements of everything so that they would fit properly. And also, which is sort of a paradox in the case of the Martini Henry, it is quite a bit smaller than the chamber. But this led to, and the construction of it, there were some issues in the 1880s that came to a head, given specific environmental reasons, that this foil cartridge was deemed to have come into play in some unreliability issues. And very quickly, within the course of a very short period of time, especially for the era, they ramped out drawn cartridge cases and produced ammunition and shipped it to where the issues had developed, which is in the Sudan in Africa in the 1880s. So they did transition, but the foil cartridges, as being sort of this curious methodology that came out of the 1860s and was carried right on into the 1890s, really. It was used right through the until the Martini went out of frontline service.
Really? I would never have guessed that. I would never have guessed that they would have lasted that long, because it looked like a stopgap thing between like just straight up like pouring powder in the muzzle and like and ramrod for components to doing this brass foil thing for a little bit and then going straight to drawn cartridges. But 30-40 years sounds pretty considerable.
Well, especially when you take it all in context. You look at it as a standalone piece, you're like, no, you're kind of giving your head a scratch, going, who would come up with this? Especially when you perhaps or believe that drawn cartridges or drawn cases have been around forever. But if you look at the construction of the Enfield muzzle loading cartridge, right, which is wrapped in paper and tied at the end, then if you take that concept of how you contain the components, being the bullet and the propellant, and in the case of muzzle loading cartridge, not the primer, but then if you incorporate a primer into it, then well, if we use not just paper, we'll use something stiffer. Use maybe brass works, and you roll that around a mandrel instead of paper, and then you clamp that into a base, and it gets crimped, and then there's a primer. Then we have a place to put the primer in the base, and now we have a center fire cartridge that shoots a bullet that's basically the same. Difference in detail, but it's approximately the same weight and whatnot. And don't forget, the Snider, of course, is a conversion of the Enfield rifle musket. They chop the back of the barrel off, and they screw that, thread it, and screw it onto what they call the shoe. Which is the Snider's in Canada anyway is kind of not a soft spot, but we used it from the very outset of its development. It was shipped to Canada because of a perceived threat. So it arrived in Canada in the same time frame as it arrived in the British Regular Army. But the thing is, we kept it until the late 1890s instead of even transitioning to the Martini Henry. So we went straight from the Snider, which is technology of the 1860s, straight to the Lee Enfield, or the magazine Lee Enfield, the long Lee Enfield, as it were, in the late 1890s, and then on into the Boer War. So we missed the Martini, the 45 caliber kind of generation of rifles. We completely, in terms of a full service, capacity, completely bypassed. So it, you can see that how it evolved in somebody's mind, and they thought this might work. And then when it came time to then transition, because the Snider was always designed as a stopgap, then to transition into the 45 caliber world, which initially the first type of a cartridge that they thought of when it came to the Martini was a straight wall, much like a 45-70. So apart from being not drawn, but it used that same construction technique. But they found that it was so long to fit 85 grains of powder on top of a 480 grain bullet that using that methodology of making the case with the foil it made it too fragile. It was too long. It didn't have it kind of support. And they then developed what essentially is a very early form of bottleneck cartridge in order to make it fatter and shorter and therefore more robust. And then you get the short chamber versus the long chamber Martini. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, if you're familiar with the movie Zulu, I don't know if you are.
I've seen
there's a line that I don't like usually making reference to it because it's so chock full of historical inaccuracies. But the actor who plays John Chard, who's the engineer officer, says there's a comment about it was a miracle, and he says if it was a miracle, it was. And he rattles off all the specs of the cartridge, and in that little phrase he uses, he mentions short chamber boxer cartridge, and that's what he's referring to. Is that the initial trials pattern was this long, skinny one that was fragile, so they shortened it up, more robust. And as it stands, the back of the cartridge is a very similar dimension to the back of the Snider cartridge. So the rim and the components are very similar in dimension. So that's why the Martini in particular is referred to as a 5.77 450, because the back was similar dimensions to the Snider, which was 5.77, and the front is 45 caliber nominal.
And that's how we get all these weird cartridge designations. That don't make any. They kind of made sense back in the day, but really, barely made any sense.
Commonly misunderstood is that the Martini is a modification of the Snider cartridge or the Snider case, and it's not. It uses similar dimensions, as they say, the rim and whatnot. But it's not a Snyder case that's been necked down. It's a whole brand new, construction, new parts. The parts are different sized and the components and whatnot. But that 577-450 aspect of it, and when you look the blank rounds of the era, for instance, are compatible in both because they're short and stubby and only contain the sort of the part of the chamber that's the widest. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's it's a curious. It kind of makes sense when you just step back, much like the foil construction. Just look at the whole picture together and see how it evolved. And they need a designation for it, so that's what they sort of came up with. Right?
Yeah, very cool. So what kind of series are you working on right now, or what's the topic du jour on your channel?
The topic du jour, I guess. Lately, I have been delving into a little bit of later stuff, World War II driven or centric. That started with your guest that you had on a couple of weeks ago, Mike from Blue Oak on the Range.
Yep.
And we had been discussing things back and forth. We talk pretty regularly. We have similar interests and similar, I think, sense of humor. We get along quite well, as our videos, I hope, would convey. But he had made arrangements to come to my part of the world for a wedding, and thought that maybe we could parlay that into a bit of a side gig. And that did work out. And he came out, and we sort of had to pick something that he would be familiar with, that I had access to, sort of everything that we needed. And we came up with an agenda, as it were, of what we wanted to cover. And that focus, we decided that it was going to be a sort of a World War II themed kind of project. And I hadn't really even considered it, to be honest with you. I thought it was a little bit kind of outside of the channel's, general gist, being the 19th century. But of course, before that, I had dealt with musketry of the First World War as well, which I found very interesting. So I said, well, there's nothing that says I can't, and it could be interesting. And then we started looking into the documentation of it, and then it became very interesting because by World War I, things had become very comprehensive, and tackling that project was incredibly interesting to me. And being able to take that, and some of the documents we found had some really interesting kind of, not niche, but things that you necessarily wouldn't expect to find in World War II musketry. And we decided to tackle them in the close quarter shooting of the era, and some other topics. We did some chat videos and whatnot about kit and sort of philosophy in terms of why things were the way they were, and delivery of musketry in certain eras and all that kind of stuff. His visit was, I had a great time. I think he had a good time too. I know he did. But that sort of started the World War II aspect of it, and I've just sort of been plugging along with that. And as they say, I try and take a rifle and then build sort of a world around it as far as the videos go. And that often, or I try anyway, to start off with some sort of introductory video to sort of, here's this rifle and this is where it came from and what it's all about. It's by no means as comprehensive as, say, See an Arsehole, which I don't know if you're familiar with. But
yeah, we've had a five on the show. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, we're talking about, he delves into extreme amounts of detail, and perhaps in one go. And my videos are sort of 20 minutes long, maybe. So rather than dealing with one rifle in one video, my channel deals with one rifle in many videos, handling different aspects of it and pushing into the shooting aspects of it. So my introductory videos are certainly nothing like what Matthias and they produce.
Yeah, you get a little bit more into the practical as well, right? So you mix not only the rifle, with the kit, with the period dress, with all these things kind of put together. So it's not just a rifle by itself or a rifle with a bipod just by itself. It's the whole kit and caboodle.
Right. And that comes back into the sort of the military application of it. Right? So by all means, I enjoy just, shooting targets. And target shooting to me is part of this. It's not necessarily by itself historical shooting. Unless you're shooting it in a period competition style with the proper targetry and all that kind of stuff. But sitting at a bench or lying on the ground and just trying for get good groups out of something, that's an aspect of what I do, because, as mentioned before, all this ammunition is handmade, and the different componentry, the different velocities that you get as a result of the different powder and whatnot, or if you're looking to get more accuracy, and sometimes service loads aren't as accurate as they can be. So by deviating slightly, I like to be as accurate as I can because I want to hit what I'm shooting at. And if that means deviating slightly in terms of velocity or powder charge, then I'm okay with that because the general concept that I use is very similar to the service, cartridge in that case. So it's something that how do you put it? It's just you have to incorporate that target shooting kind of mentality at times. And then once you sort of finish that phase of working up a particular rifle with a particular load, well, then you can really delve into the historical because you're confident that your rifle is as accurate as you can get it and that it's going to perform the way it, or as close to the way it should. So, it's some of my videos, I've done a kit series because people ask all the time where it comes from and where I get it and all this stuff. And of course, to try and present that in a way that is one, interesting, and two, I can just direct people to answer their questions. The part of those videos, I've tried to sort of put what I do in the right context, and it sort of hangs out in the middle between target shooting and like reenactment, which of course doesn't use live ammunition. It doesn't necessarily deal at all in most cases with actually shooting a rifle. That's not to say that people who do that don't shoot. But as far as the reenactment and the living history side of it goes, typically there is no shooting, blank rounds perhaps. So it exists somewhere in the middle of that. And of course, that is a sliding scale. So it means different things to different people. But there's some key aspects that, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I think that are sort of really core to what it's all about.
Yeah, so it's a fantastic channel and really a really interesting way of kind of exploring those older rifles and the older marksmanship fundamentals. Just before we let you go here, how do people find out about you and what different social media platforms can people find you on?
Well, in that regard, I would say that perhaps I'm a bit of a Luddite, but the channel is on YouTube, British Muzzleloaders, one word, or you can Google the name of particular 19th century rifles like Snyders or Martinis or Enfields, and you'll probably arrive there by searching for them. But also there's a Facebook page, again, of the same name, British Muzzleloaders, and the links for both are typically incorporated into both the YouTube videos as well as the link to the channel is in the Facebook page as well. So, but there's no Twitter, there's no Instagram. I'm not taking butt pictures in my kilt and putting them up. So I
mean, you might get a little bit more followers if you do, though. Maybe the wrong kind, wrong audience.
Well, it's funny, a story like that, not about butt pictures, but there was a particular video that entered into some logarithm somewhere, and it was if it wasn't the video you were speaking, it was shooting the Martini at longer ranges, and somehow at the time the Battlefield 1 game had come out.
You got triggered on Battlefield 1, right?
And because I found out later, has a Martini component to it, and it's in the game it's some super weapon, and it's crazy that it would be incorporated into a World War I game, because the only use of it was during the Great War was to shoot down Zeppelins with an incendiary bullet, because they couldn't get an incendiary bullet that was big enough in a .303 caliber, so they needed the .45 caliber, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I digress. All of a sudden, that particular video was inundated with comments about I'm just trying to remember, camping, I think was one of them, and nerfing. and I, at the time, I had just no idea. I'm not particularly up on that culture. I have played those kinds of games in the past, and I'm not a gamer by any means, but these terms were not particularly familiar to me, especially when we're dealing with historical musketry. And it took a very kind individual to sort of come on and say, I think Rob doesn't know at all what you people are talking about. And he took the time to explain it all about what camping means and why there was such vitriol surrounding, people were swearing at me because I'm a camper. Because I was in the video, of course, lying at a firing point, shooting at 400 yards, trying to hit a target and not moving around and whatnot. And then the other one was nerfing because they thought, I guess at some point, the rifle was exceptionally powerful in the game.
They reduced the power of it in the game.
And they reduced the power of it, turning it into a Nerf gun, which it makes complete sense when I know what they're talking about. But I didn't at the time. So that was kind of made me laugh. But the video went from, a few tens of thousands of views over, it had been a year old or something at the time. And then it went right, nothing I have goes through the roof, but comparatively, it was like 250,000 views or something, which was far and away at that time, more than any other video on the channel. So
yeah, exactly. Well, it makes me super happy that a bunch of Battlefield gamers got introduced to period correct kit and and an old timey marksmanship through your channel by watching that
and
video.
There's no bipod on a martini ever. sorry.
Yeah, you get to wreck all their preconceived notions about what they can do in the game versus real life. But that's so funny. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Rob, and hopefully you get to introduce more gamers to old timey equipment and firearms. And we'll be sure to put the links to your YouTube and Facebook channel on the show notes.
Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Thanks again to Rob for coming on the show. Finally, some listener feedback. So on YouTube, there's not really a lot going on over there right now, but if you're listening to this on a podcast app, you can listen to, or watch us record live on Thursday nights, and you can comment on YouTube if you would like to. In terms of listener feedback on emails, we don't have any of that, but if we did, it would be sponsored by Armory DC Gunsmith. Armory DC Gunsmith is a full-service gunsmith who specializes in firearms refinishing. He offers hot bluing, parkerizing, and Cerakote finishes, as well as wood refinishing. Check out his online inventory of new and used guns, firearms, accessories, optics, and more at dcgunsmith.ca, and check him out on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to send the show an email, send it to slamfireradio@gmail.com. Podcast app reviews, we don't have any of those this week, but if you'd like to, go ahead and review us on iTunes. I think iTunes is the big one right now. I'm not sure if many of the other ones have ratings in there, but we love when our listeners give us ratings and reviews on those apps. Finally, shout outs. I've got a shout out to the guys over at BSSA for putting on a killer match. It took a while to build. It was a lot longer of a build than I'm used to, but the quality of the match and the quality of the stages, you could really feel it afterwards, because those stages had so much of that freestyle, plan your stage out. There's many different ways of doing some of those different stages. And that was something that was really interesting and really present that was in their match. So thanks again to those guys for putting on that match. I think it was excellent. Patreon supporters, if you'd like to support us, head on over to patreon.com/Slamfire Radio. We send out, and I sent out a bunch last week. So if you're still waiting on a patch, send us an email. But we send out patches and stickers to people who support us on Patreon, and that money turns out to help us with hosting and better AV equipment and that kind of thing, so we can do a better job for you guys. So if you'd like to support us, head on over to patreon.com. Finally, if you don't want to support us through that, but you're going to buy something from Cabela's anyways, head over to our website. There's a button there that links to Cabela's, but it kind of tells Cabela's that we sent you. It's like, hey, by the way, these guys are here because of Slamfire. And if you turn out and buy something on Cabela's, Cabela's will kick us back a couple of bucks. So it's an easy way to support the show if you intend on buying something from Cabela's anyways. Join one or more of our national firearms associations, such as the CCFR. Check us out on Gun Owners of Canada, and like us on Facebook. We're right around 2,130 right now. And finally, we'll see you next week.
So if you have any comments or questions for the show, please send an email to slamfireradio@gmail.com. Now go grab a gun and shoot something.
When the talking is over, it's time to get a gun.
All right, for you guys who are sticking in with me, we're going to get this show rolling. It's going to be fast, because it's just, maybe I could make it slow. I could do whatever I want to. It's my show. Ultimate power. I won't let it go to my head within the first 5 minutes. Maybe after that.